Hey, everybody, I don't know about you, but as you've watched out over the world, the war in Russia and Ukraine is not just isolated to Eastern Europe. It's spread all over the world, and you can see it in market instabilities. You can see it here. People who do not think that that war is affecting you, all you got to do is look at gas prices. You look at your food prices. You see the global change that has happened. But you know something that's also affected investments as well. And I've said all along, legacy precious metals is your navigator. They're the ones that see you through to get to the next level. The good news about this is even with market volatility, market instability, you've got options. And gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold. And gold presents a hedge against this inflation and that protects you against the weakening dollar, which we are seeing. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust to deal with gold and silver and the other precious metals. You need this investment. You need this as part of your portfolio to keep you buffered from what we're seeing in the world, war and volatility in the market. This is where you need to be. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive about this. Get on board with it. Call them at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. legacypminvestments.com, your navigator in a volatile world of investments.
Do you want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
All right, everybody, can you believe it? We're at the end of 2022. I mean, I'm beginning to believe more and more in my life that the days are long and the years are short. And this is becoming more and more one of those every time I look around. 2022, I mean, it's just seems like yesterday we were just starting this year. We're coming out of 2021. We're coming out of 2020. I don't know about you, but the blur of the last 3 or 4 years has been just amazing. You look back, and I've had so many friends comment on this. I'm sure you all have too. That COVID year, the 2020 year, the 21. It just all begins to run together. In all fairness, and in my world, especially, it was from Congress to impeachments to everything else. The last 4 years, I'm just sitting back saying, "Wow, where did time go?" And it's always good toward the end of the year here. And we've had a lot of great podcasts here recently. And, coming off between this year, this week of between Christmas and New Year's, it's just a good time to take and to settle back. So this week on the podcast, we're going to do a few things, one old and two new. I like to have two news and an old here. This week, we're going to talk about we're going to look back, starting with this podcast, looking back on 2022, hitting some of the top topics, sending some of the things. And if you've got some ideas that maybe I missed, send me an email. Go to the DougCollinsPodcast.com, hit that email button and send me an email if you have some thoughts. And we may do a follow-up in the first of the year saying, oh, wow, I forgot this. And we'll talk more about it. So I'd love to have your input. The next podcast, we're going to do a look ahead. I'm going to look at 2023. If that's hard to believe we're saying that, and see some things that I think will be driving the narrative in 2023. And also as a special treat on that one, I'm going to make some predictions on who's going to win the major sporting in the NBA, in Major League Baseball, NFL, and the NCAA, who's going to win the championship. So a little bit of hold on there for you on that one. And then we're going to end the year as we did last year, and that's with Reagan's A Time for Choosing. And last year was so well received. I wanted to do it again because it's always that time. It's a reminder at the end of the year that choices determine our destiny. It is what we choose to do or not do. And so many times, and I get really frustrated in times with myself, but also with others when we sit and wonder. Have you ever done that? Just sit and wonder why you're in the position you are. If we would just sit back and say, well, we're in the position we are because we did this or did not do this, it reminds us that we have to make every day count. So with that little preview of what's coming ahead, it's always good to be a part of your life. And again, maybe at the end of the year, it's time for you to share this podcast. I'd love for you to share it on your platforms, whoever you use on your platforms. just let me know let them know what podcast you were listening to here at the end of the year. Maybe they'll subscribe and they'll be a part of the Doug Collins podcast family. We're glad to have you. Got a big year coming up, so you want to be a part of it. So let's get started. Let's look at review of 2022. Well, you can't start the review of 2022 without dealing with the election year. It was an election year all year. I mean, we just finished up. We've talked about this here on the podcast here in Georgia. I want to mention some things and just go back over it just as a reminder, because it's hard to believe that this election cycle is over for many states like Georgia, Arizona, some of the states that was in play, North Carolina, and some of the others are, the ideas that are out there is basically that we never stopped the 2022 election never stopped from 2020. And I think, that is something that, I think has driven the narrative here for so long that nobody got a break. In Georgia, literally, it was almost like we were on a 3-year election cycle. The whole coming out of 2019, we had 2020, 2021, and into 2022. It was just a constant thing. One of my takeaways from the review of this year, as I was sitting here writing some stuff down, was the election fatigue. And I wonder if it was truly, and I heard this from a lot of commentators, I said, was it truly election fatigue, or was it something else? Was it truly election fatigue in the sense that, people were tired of elections, or were they tired of some of the same themes? Were they tired of hearing, again, about 2020 election? Were they not convinced that 2022 was going to change anything? I think as we look at 22 election cycle, some things that came out for me was that people were getting to be more and more skeptical of both parties. You saw this in a president right now who is a sitting president, Joe Biden, whose negative numbers have been, consistently bad, if not some of the historically worst that we've ever seen. You see the Republicans now looking at what 2024 would look like in a presidential year, already being talked about. You looked at what was starting as a red wave that became basically a trickle, just a small stream. Some good things happened for Republicans, but at the same point in time, you also have to look at the expectation and reality. Expectation was, winning 2 or 3 20, 30 seats in the House. You'd have a 240, margin. Everything at the start of 2022 was looking like this was a red wave year. It was building into that red wave. And somewhere along the way, and just as we look back, it turned. I think we've settled this a lot on the podcast, but I did want to hit a couple of things that did stick out to me as I've sort of, again, continue to ponder this election cycle. And one, I think, is what I just said, election fatigue, that people were they were tired. And I know in Georgia, although we had great turnout, even some of the projected turnout, though, was higher than what we actually experienced. But the idea of voter fraud, the idea of this suppression was just not there, especially after Georgia in particular took ridicule for this Senate Bill 202, which redid and strengthened our election integrity laws. Everybody said it was just going to be horrible, and in reality, it wasn't. One of the other things besides, I think, voter fatigue, I think, is you saw candidate indifference. I think you saw across the country, you saw candidates who either you just couldn't meld with the voters that were electing them, or you had, like in Georgia, you had Stacey Abrams who couldn't catch lightning in a bottle again. You had states in which, again, I think one of the bigger issues coming out of this election cycle is you had an incumbent wave again. This has become the norm. You see incumbents being reelected at much higher averages than you do across the general public. And we saw it again this year. In Georgia, we saw it. In Ohio, we saw it. In Wisconsin, we saw it. This is something that is coming along that inherently goes to the system that we're in. And the system we're in is a very much incumbent-centered election process in which incumbents have inherent advantages. And I think, for an incumbent to lose actually is the bigger story than an incumbent winning. And then, so when you combine voter fatigue, the incumbency, what I say primacy is when the indicator is people will go to the poll, and if they're not really sure, they don't really care, they'll look for the aisle next to the name and vote for the incumbent. those are things that are driving our election cycles. The other thing that's driving our election cycles, and I think we saw it in 2022, and this is something that I've said, and we've talked about here on the podcast, is that for conservatives, if they're going to get into the game, especially winning back suburb areas, winning back urban areas, is they're going to have to do really two basic things that are apart from campaigns. One is that the Republican committee, whether it be the national committee or the state committees, need to focus on fundraising, and they need to focus on the internal list building, digital presences. Digital is the new wave. We've had on this podcast, we've had Phil from Push Digital. We've had Wes Dunham from Push Digital and others. And you see these digital companies that are coming along, and they're the ones making the difference as we go forward in these election cycles, because as people turn more and more away from broadcast TV, when they turn more away from some of the normal mediums, then it is companies like Push Digital and others who are out there that are going to be carrying the torch as you go forward. Email listings, these are things that need to be built on by the parties. And if you do these kind of things, then you're going to be conservatives. You're going to be able to, in better places to turn out votes in areas, in targeted areas, instead of, having to sort of go to the rural urban kind of construct that we've went into with Republicans for the last little bit. So I'm telling this and saying this as a review, but also as a temporary look ahead. If the Republican Party doesn't get a handle on the small dollar fundraising, which the Democrats have gotten down pat, and the Republicans don't get a handle on right now, worrying less about the candidate and the purity and the policies, which need to be a part. Don't get me wrong. Republican Party needs to stand for something, and we need to stand for something that it puts it out there. We need candidates who are the voters can hold to those standards. But also at the same point in time, you cannot just simply have parties and members of parties that are simply more worried about a position on a certain vote as they are about winning the elections. At some point in here, the party, and I think the Democratic Party has done a great job of this, and some of their outside groups have done a great job of this. They focus on winning elections, and that they know that if they get enough Democrats into office to have a majority, that they will get most of what they want. They may not get all of what they want, but they'll get most of what they want. Republicans have got to understand that winning elections means governing, and to win elections, it is more of the issues behind the scenes that nobody sees, that nobody talks about, nobody likes to do. Nobody likes to put together databases. Nobody likes to put together the list building for the emails. Nobody likes to say, how are we targeting with our digital? And doing that in the off year. I think 2022 showed this is a review that I think is a weakness from Republicans. Hopefully they'll grow from it. Some did well, some did not. This is a growth issue that I think we're going to have to, that we saw develop in 2022, that going forward, if this was the part of the look ahead, this would be an issue that is got to be ground in. The other thing we saw in 2022 was I think you saw it in Pennsylvania, you saw it some in Georgia, you saw it making races in North Carolina and Wisconsin, and even Ohio closer than I think you would have normally seen it. And that is that people, especially on the Republican side, once the primaries were over, did not get behind the Republican candidate. And I think that hurt. There was much issues, which we've already discussed about. But I think that's something, looking back on this, I don't think many people has expected it to be at the extent of what we saw. So the year in review, summing it up a little bit in just the election cycle without trying to go back over in detail things that we've already touched on before, was just, I think, voter fatigue from getting through this cycle. I think there was a big sigh of relief across the country when the final ballots were finally cast in Georgia, and now we move into move past the election cycle. Hopefully that will be a little quieter and that people can get re-energized for what will be a very important 2024 cycle in the coming months. Number two, I think it is a time when we review it, we have to take a review. An after action report said that the Republican red wave could have been, but wasn't. And a couple of those factors were simply, lack of message that resonated in candidates who resonated with voters, a lack of an infrastructure in many of the parties on list building, fundraising, targeted demographics to get out the votes that need to be got out. I think we saw the rise is going back one last time here of digital campaigning. Digital campaigning is here to stay. If you're an older consultant or even a newer consultant who believes simply you blast broadcast TV, you do the old stuff, you're going to have to take into account the different states that you're in, but you're also going to have to take into account now digital is the way of the future and is how you're going to continue to relate to voters. All of that said, the red wave that wasn't had a lot of factors to it. And the interesting part of it, most of it was on the Republican side. The Democrats had one issue we're going to look back on here in a minute, but for the most part, this was I think a lost opportunity for Republicans in many, many ways. All right. One of the issues that looking back, if you cannot look back at 2022 and not see the impact of the Dobbs decision out of Mississippi on abortion. I'll be the first to admit, when you look at an issue, and I thought back in May that this determination of this issue would not have a dramatic impact on the races, I still stick to the fact that I think that was true to an extent. But I do believe the Democrats were able to use the issue against Republicans who were refusing to actually engage on the issue. What did it mean, though, for life in this country? I mean, the substantial drop in abortions in Texas and other places where limited abortion rights are available or no abortion rights are available in those states. You're seeing it all across the country. Life is being put forth. And we're seeing that in the lower abortion rates going forward. What's that going to mean, though? Is it's also going to mean that, as I said earlier this past year, that you're going to have groups step up, and people are going to have to be there to help folks in those unwanted pregnancies, helping kids, helping those families, nurturing those going forward. Life does not simply matter in the womb; it matters from birth to death. And I think we've got to, from a conservative perspective, this is something we're going to have to look at. It's going to have to be something more than just our voice. It's going to have to be our decision with government, our decision with private enterprise, and our decision with organizations to help these families now that these new babies that are going to be born. So I think you can't overlook the significance of this. It also, it was interesting in this year with many of the decisions from the gun cases to the abortion cases, Supreme Court ruled the media domination in 2022. And I think you'll see some more of this coming up in the future. This 6-3 Supreme Court that is decidedly conservative is going to make a mark for a long time on the jurisprudence. For many of us, it is a welcome jurisprudence and one which looks at the Constitution, compares it to the law, and then makes a decision. And where Roe and Casey were overturned this year, which most people never thought was going to happen, you actually put the law back into place and said you're not going to make up law. Now, an interesting part of that was that the Supreme Court actually looking at 2022, the Supreme Court forced the Congress and the executive branches to examine their own roles. I think they're just getting started in that. I'm not sure the legislative branch has learned this lesson yet. But the Supreme Court, in essence, said, Congress, if you want to do something, you got to pass a law. How do I know that it took bait just a little bit? Was in this the same-sex marriage bill that was just passed in the House and the Senate, and President Biden signed just recently, that came from the discussion out of the abortion decision for the Obergefell decision. This was one that Clarence Thomas actually raised a little bit of a question in one of his concurrences. So the Congress, which they could have always done with Roe, they could have always done with these issues, chose to do that. They did so, I think, at the expense of religious liberties, and I think there's some challenges coming to this law as it goes forward. But again, it showed Congress that if you really, instead of depending on the judicial system, which is what the left has done for really over 50 years in many of these social situations, they're going to say, look, you got to be the legislative branch. You're the body that makes the laws. As long as they're within the Constitution, they're going to be upheld in this Supreme Court. And the executive branch has saw that as well. Hopefully, it'll get back to where the legislative branch actually exerts its influence on the executive branch more in the terms of just general appropriations, oversights, and the things coming. We'll see how that goes. I'm not hopeful there, but you can't overlook the Supreme Court when you do a review of 2022, because these decisions will have lasting impact. They had some election impact, but they also had a lot of societal impact, whether it be abortion, whether it be guns, Religious liberties. I mean, you're doing away with the lemon test when it comes to, what you can and can't say in the public square. I think we're just beginning to see the foundational look ahead on what these cases will actually mean. And I think it's going to be good as we move forward. One of the things that is still, looking out that's going, when you look back on it, I'm going to mention just a little bit about these Supreme Court cases, was the guns issue. Again, every time someone is harmed with a gun, the left is continuing and making progress on more and more gun control in this country. We saw it in the bills passed by the House and Senate, signed by Joe Biden, which I am very concerned that will make just normal private sales almost non-existent in this country without government regulation, government background checks, and which will eventually, whether they want to admit that publicly or not, they admit it privately on their websites and others, to a gun registration issue that we could have in this country. So I think, again, looking back on 2020, when you take abortion, you take guns, you take the religious liberties cases, the Supreme Court had a big stamp on 2022. The last thing that I wanted to look at as we go forward today is the Ukraine. And in the Ukraine and the issues that are surrounding the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, again, this is the probably the biggest world geopolitical issue that we had come up this year, and it's still there. And Putin has admitted just in recent days of the struggles and the issues that they're having. Russian troops did not want to be there. Many of them are willingly being captured. They're trying to figure out ways to defect. They're trying to get away from this. How this ends, though, is going to be interesting. And we just recently on the podcast, you heard Carl Higbee and I talking about this. If we're going to get equipment to Ukraine, it's got to come into the form of bullets and guns and equipment, and it can't keep getting stopped at the border and with mainly humanitarian aid. If they're going to, if you're going to do this, then at least do it to where they'll have the chance to repel Russia even more. And with what they've done, with what they've got, has been pretty impressive. This idea that we just stop now and give Putin whatever part he wants, I think is not going to be well received by definitely will not be received by the Ukrainians, but it also has a very lasting impact on the world geopolitical situation as well. Is if that be the standard, then why doesn't every country just, hey, if I want another piece of this other country, I just invade them, and then nobody will do anything, and I'll get what I want. A lot of problems here. Not saying that the U.S. is going to be a police force, not saying the U.S. needs to put ground troops on there, but there is a consideration out of 2022 when you look back on back to February, that we've been dealing with this war in the Ukraine for that long. And probably as you look forward, it's probably going to still be into 2023. Don't see a resolution coming. But again, when you look back at 2022, you can't deny the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because it affected the last thing I wanted to talk about as well, and that is inflation. Inflation and economy drove this country for the last year. We've seen interest rates go up. We've seen houses prices beginning to drop. You've seen the job market still relatively stable, but you're starting to see layoffs. You're starting to see what the Federal Reserve wanted to do, and that was basically bring this economy to a much, much slower pace to bring inflation down. Is inflation coming down? Yes. Not quickly, but it is coming down. The Fed has seen that rate lowered to a half point, the last interest rate hike. And again, though, for those who are investing, those who have loans, who may be affected by an adjustable rate, this has been a hard year. And you couple that with inflation. These are the stories of 2022, whether it be the election year, the red wave that wasn't, the impact of the Supreme Court with the abortion decision, the gun decisions, the religious liberties decisions, the Coach Kennedy prayer case. All these things have added up to really a momentous year in many of it a conservative way. The question is how do you capitalize on it? The Ukraine is still going to be an issue out there. We're putting more money out into it, but more of that money, if we're actually going to spend the money, then it needs to go to the very front line of the troops with bullets and guns and other things to actually, fight this battle. So that is the sort of a look back. I know there's a lot of things out there you may have had an interest in, but feel free, email me at thedougcollinspodcast.com and we'll get into it. Before we go, though, I got a couple of things I want to hit with you, and that is the big movies of 2022. And as we go forward, of course, you couldn't get after many, many years of waiting. Top Gun Maverick, the sequel to the original Top Gun, came out wonderfully, came out beautifully. It's just one that you would not want to get. We've had Avatar return here toward the end of the year. The rise of the movies on Netflix, on the other subscription services are now becoming more and more than what you see in the movie houses. But again, we're starting to get back out there. People are starting to go back and see the movies. They're starting to be more cognizant and aware, however you want to put it, as we go. And so it's exciting to see that out there. But just in remembrances of some of these, The Northman, All Quiet on the Western Front. Again, 13 Lives, about the boys rescued from Thailand. These are the kind of movies that we're seeing come back in, and I hope that we see more and more of this coming in to the new year as we see it would be a shame to lose the ability, the Elvis movie and others, instead of seeing them in the big screen and being able to see that. You don't want to lose that. On the music front for 2022, music is been out there. Country music, EDM, rap, artists like Bad Bunny, Charlie Puth, just so many out there that are just making this. Cardi B, we got all kinds of things. Again, a vast variety of audiences. I'm not trying to, whatever your frame of music is, I hope you enjoyed it because it's been a really, really good year for music as well. So 2022, you've been interesting. 2022, you've left us with a lot of, at times, frustration. A lot of times you have left us with new things to think about. But as we always look back, the question is what do we learn? And right now, I think the biggest thing from 2022 is that we've got to look at the problems that are facing us and actually do something about them. People are getting tired of not just elections. They're getting tired of nothing happening in between the elections. That, to me, is one of the biggest election takeaways from 2022. So with that, that is the look backwards. In just a couple of days, we'll put forward what to look forward to in 2023. Until then, we'll see you again on the Doug Collins Podcast. Hey folks, MyPillow is excited to bring to you their biggest bedding sale ever, and just in time for Christmas. For a limited time, you're going to get the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98, a set of pillowcases for only $9.98, and rejuvenate your bed with a MyPillow mattress topper for as low as $99.99. $99.99. Get a mattress pillow topper. Look, they come in all sizes. They got all kinds of stuff. Blankets. They've got duvets. They got quilts. They got comforters. They got body pillows. They got bolster pillows. They got all at big, big discounts. And also, they're extending their money-back guarantee for Christmas until March 1, 2023, making them the perfect gift for your friends, your family, and for everyone you know. Folks, and just from a personal note here, I have the Giza Dream Sheets. They're on my bed right now. I slept on them last night. Some of the best sheets that we and Lisa and I have ever owned. They are worth, at this price, they're a steal. My wife and I have bought bed sheets, linens at much higher cost. It's supposedly much higher quality. These from MyPillow are at the highest of quality, and at a price like this, you can't beat it. So go now to MyPillow.com, use promo code Collins, COLLINS, or call 1-800-986-3994, and you'll get huge discounts on all the MyPillow bedding products, including the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98, and get all your shopping done while qualities last. And remember, put in that promo code Collins for these discounts.